let's talk about some logistics of the arm lock. Oftentimes we talk about once we get to this position, we got three things to check, and rightfully so. We need to check them. We need to talk about the thumb always pointing away from me. We often talk about wrist being always glued to my chest on the side of the hip of my partners, right? Closer to their hip, not to their head. And then last final one is the knee pinching. So as my extension takes place, the hyperextension is fully in effect. But let's take a look at this from a more conceptual perspective. And I'm hoping this is really going to change how you look at arm locks. Because arm locks, it's all about extending the elbow, right? The elbow is right here, it's pointing in this direction right there. And if I push it in the opposite direction, the hinge overextends and creates pressure. But more often, or I should say often forgotten part, is the wrist and the shoulder. See, if my partner puts their arm flat on the ground and I try to pressure it up, the pressure is not going to be as significant. The moment I put something underneath the shoulder, the pressure increases very easily. So controlling the opposite joints of the one that we are attacking oftentimes brings even more success. It doesn't have to, you have to do all of this. However, knowing how mechanically this works brings us by far more success. So why do we care? Elevating the shoulder creates space underneath that elbow. Controlling the wrist puts both the shoulder and wrist in a position of immobility. And now simply applying pressure against that elbow creates the desired attack. Right? My partner instantly feels the pressure, and hopefully they tap to avoid injuries. So how can we put this, can we make this applicable in a real life scenario, right? So we'll talk about just a handful of techniques that might be taking place, right? One, if my partner's shoulder is on the ground, and you can probably see this right off the bat, the shoulder is glued to the ground, I oftentimes have to pull very hard to create the hyperextension of the elbow. However, if I create elevation of that shoulder, as it is right now, there's a gap underneath that shoulder, that pressure is much quicker. I don't have to work as much. So the higher elevation we have of that shoulder, more success I'm going to have. This is where we can reach into more advanced techniques, like tucking my foot underneath the shoulder to create even more elevation, right? And you might not be familiar with this particular setup. If you're not, take a look at the videos that we have for arm locks. That one is definitely available. I encourage you to get familiar with it. But take a look at this. Now the shoulder gets elevated up. So if I step over my partner's neck, the arm lock is much quicker, and I have by far more control. And this might be the reason why executing arm lock from S-mount is so powerful. If you've done this before, let's turn. If you've done this before, you already know the moment I step over, the hyperextension takes place. Matter of fact, many are huge fans of not even stepping over, just simply tucking the knee in and creating the hyperextension because the shoulder is so elevated and elbow is already in a fully compromised position. So as you're sponging this entire concept, always when you are in the arm lock position, take a look at the elevation of the shoulder that you are attacking, on the side that you are attacking. Higher it is, probably more extension you will have. More flat to the ground it is, this is probably where you will be working more. And before we finish, I also want to look at the opposite side of all of this. So let's take it one more time. When we lay down, if the shoulder is on the ground, now my partner can easily tuck the elbow in, which creates defensive mechanism. The moment the shoulder is off the ground, the tucking in is much harder because of that elevation. So if we find ourselves in the arm lock position and the shoulder is elevated, my partner will have less opportunity to tuck the elbow in. Now the moment the shoulder is flat on the ground, let's make this intentional, yeah, there you go. It's flat on the ground. And now I have by far less length of the arm. The elbow is talking about mid-thigh. As I'm extending it out and my partner pulls it back in, now the defense mechanisms begin. So always keep that in mind. Shoulder is the key, even though we are attacking the elbow.